Welcome. It is Verdict with Ted Cruz, Week in Review. Ben Ferguson with you, and these are the stories that you may have missed that we talked about this week. First up, an amazing moment where the WNBA, the W stands for women, can actually figure out what a woman actually is. And now there's a chance that men claiming they're women could take over the WNBA. What happens next? We explain it. Up next, El Sayed. You know him as the radical extremist in the Democratic Party, well, the Democratic Socialists. He wants you to know he carries such great American values. He even hates football and explains that it's too masculine. It's toxic masculinity. And finally, there's a real threat in this country with radicals who are running for office claiming they're normal. Many of them also claim to be men of faith. They're pastors. But what are they actually saying from the pulpit? We explain that and expose it as well. It's the Week in Review, and it starts right now. I want to move on to another subject, and this one is one that just makes me grin from ear to ear. You and I have been covering men and women's sports, defending women's sports, advocating for women only in women's sports. You've been called every name in the book. I've been called every name in the book. And we talked about this, Senator, I think it was a couple years ago on the show where I said there was two interesting things that were happening at the time. One, there was a group of basically former college players / some that tried to play early on in the mini tours in golf that were looking at trying to join the LPGA tour, claiming they were women. The LPGA got wind of that, and they put up blockades to make sure, hey, we're just going to have women. Then it also happened with the WTA Tour, professional women's tennis. The same thing. They went after and attacked Martina Navratilova, one of the pioneers of the hard, of women in the left in her movement. She was one of the first openly gay athletes in all of women's sports. It cost her millions in endorsements, by the way. She came out and said no to men and women's tennis, and then they attacked her for that. Fast forward to now, and you knew it was going to happen at some point. Somebody was going to screw up and not protect women's sports and allow for men to say, okay, I'm in, and I'm going to prove a point. We are now at that point with the WNBA where men are saying, I'm declaring for the draft as a woman, I'm transgender. That's how I identify. How can you keep me out? It is a very interesting and a big moment. I'm glad it's happening, by the way.
Well, it started 2 weeks ago with our friend Clay Travis. And Clay Travis put out a public challenge. He challenged for the Las Vegas Aces, which is the reigning national champion WNBA team, to play a team of high school boys of his choosing. He said a high school state champion. I will pick a high school state champion. And Clay said, I will give $10 million of my own money to the winners. He made that challenge 2 weeks ago.
Crickets.
Crickets.
And by the way, he has a $10 million. Let's be clear. This was not a joke. He meant it when he tweeted it out.
And in fact, Clay followed up, said important. Not only have the WNBA and the Las Vegas Aces refused to respond to my $10 million boys high school challenge, no rich left-wingers have stepped up to take the $10 million challenge either. Why? They're all liars and cowards. They know the high school boys would smoke the WNBA champions. It is stunning that there is no response. $10 million is a lot of money. You know, these WNBA players.
It's $2 million a player, by the way. $2 million a player if there's 5 players. If you divide the money
goes
equally,
to the starting 5, it's $2 million each.
Yeah.
And these are players that wear shirts that say, pay us what we're worth.
Yes.
And you have
by the
someone.
Way, if you did, they've lost money every year as a league when they put those T-shirts on. So actually, they would be paying the WNBA to let them play if you actually look at the real math.
And I'll tell you, I had TMZ accost me on the Capitol this past week to ask me about this. And here's what I had to say. Give it a listen.
Could I ask you a question, please, Ted? How are you, man? It's good to see you.
I'm doing well.
Hey, have you been following the WNBA and this transgender debate that's it's all they're talking about there?
I saw Clay Travis offered $10 million
Could I come in?
I'd watch that game.
Could I just ask, Megyn Kelly said that Caitlin Clark is a coward for not taking a side in either this or that. What do you feel about that?
Oh, look, Caitlin Clark is a hell of a ball player and fun to watch.
Do you think she should take a side?
At the end of the day, I don't think athletes are required to express an opinion on every topic. I think it is clearly unfair to allow boys to compete against girls and to allow men to compete against women. Boys and girls are different, and mankind has known that literally since the dawn of time.
Is it a big issue, though, at WNBA level? Like, I don't see many...
I'm curious, tell me, what does the W stand for?
Women.
It seems that there's some coaches in the WNBA who can't figure that out.
But should they also be, like, sympathetic and empathetic for young little girls who, like, are feeling an identity crisis? They want to play sport, they want to be with their friends.
If they're boys, they're not young little girls. And the fact that your ideology... Do you think it would be fair to let LeBron James play in the WNBA?
No, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about young people.
Well, you're talking about old people, too. You're not just saying 5-year-olds.
Well, I think at like
the WNBA doesn't have 5-year-olds.
At a professional level, yeah, I mean, obviously. But at a minor level, when these kids are just trying to be happy and be kids, not letting them socialize with their friends just because they're a bit different.
They can be happy. But to be honest, though, a lot of the transgenderism is coming from leftist adults who are convincing their kids of this nonsense. And it is really sad to see the ideology of parents. Listen, I think God knows what he's doing when he makes a little boy. I think God knows what he's doing when he makes a little girl. And I think the phenomenon of woke leftist adults... I read a tweet once from Cynthia Nixon, the actress, who said her child is trans, her sister's child is trans, all of her friends' children are trans. You know what that is? That's adults putting their politics and their ideology on their kids. And I feel
maybe it's letting their kids be who they really are. Maybe, you don't know. We don't know.
You know what? If you don't know what a boy is and you don't know what a girl is, there's a reason you work at TMZ.
Oh, all right then, Ted. I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Senator, I got to say, I enjoy when TMZ starts asking you questions in D.C. It's one of the best things I've ever done to expand to D.C. this way. And your last line there was quite a zinger. Well played.
And I'll tell you what, if I were ever, I'd be the greatest women's basketball coach in history. Because I don't like LeBron James. I like Michael Jordan much better. But I'd go up to LeBron James, it doesn't matter. I'd say, LeBron, did you ever have any desire to be a woman? Because what I'd love you to do is star on my team that I'm building up. I will have the greatest team in history. They'll never lose. Nobody will come within 70 points of this team. Now, we have to change that, and we have to make it okay to talk about it. You know, the young lady I was talking about is afraid to talk about it. She's shunned and she's canceled when she talks about it. This is crazy.
You listen to Donald Trump there. He not only does he make a great point, but he's right. We should be able to talk about this. And if you are an athlete that's trying to defend yourself, specifically if you're a woman playing in women's sports, you shouldn't be shunned or silenced the way that so many women in women's sports have been. Riley Gaines is a great example of that.
Well, and now it's not hypothetical, because following Clay Travis's challenge this past week, Ennis Freedom Cantor, decided, okay, if you guys are saying that any dude who says he's a woman can play, I'll take you up on it. And give a listen to Ennis Freedom's announcement.
After careful consideration and reviewing the current eligibility guidelines, I am officially declaring myself a WNBA prospect. If simply declaring who you are is all that's required, then I meet every single requirement necessary to compete in the WNBA. My team and I have carefully examined the WNBA's eligibility criteria and governing framework surrounding self-identification and inclusion. Based on the current guidelines, I can and am officially declaring my eligibility for the upcoming WNBA draft in May 2027. I am definitely not here to mock, make fun of, or disrespect any community or personal choices. I am simply asking that the current rules be applied equally to everyone. The rules that represent the very values many WNBA players and coaches have publicly advocated for. My team and I are prepared to ensure these guidelines are applied equally, consistently, and without exception. And I look forward to the WNBA honoring its stated principles. See you at training camp.
See you at training camp. That's the best line of all. So I got to ask you, Senator, over under the WNBA flinches now having men who are declaring they're women declare for the WNBA draft. Will they go through with it, or do you think they'll probably say, okay, we got to fix this now and actually protect women?
Well, and let's give a little more context. Enes Kanter is 6'10". He's 250 pounds.
Yeah.
He played in the NBA. He went in the first draft. He was the number 3 pick. In his career in the NBA, he averaged 11.2 points per game, 7.8 rebounds per game, and 0.9 assists per game. He was the starting center for the Boston Celtics. He was a serious NBA center. And then actually, he ended up getting fired because he spoke out against the Chinese communists oppressing the Uyghurs, having concentration camps of over 1 million people, and the NBA blocked him out and shut him out because they cared more about selling the NBA to China than they did about human rights. And so even though Kanter was still like a top-performing center in the NBA, he immediately became shunned. In this instance, look, I tweeted out in response to Enes's, and he changed his name to Enes Freedom Kanter, which I think is great. And you know, I got to know Enes a little bit. I said, all right, if this happens, Enes is going to break Wilt Chamberlain's record for 100 points in a game. Wilt has the record for the most points in a pro basketball game. It was 100 point. Because literally at 6'10", he can just stand there with his hand above his head holding the ball, and there's literally nothing they could do, and then he'll just drop it in the basket. Like, it would be ridiculous. By the way, right after that, right after he did so, Royce White, who also played in the NBA, announced that he was declaring for the WNBA draft. The WNBA has a crisis. You know, their commissioner came out and they said, well, these questions are very complicated, which means I think it is 100% they are going to block them. I don't know how, because their ideology is incoherent. Their ideology says anyone who says, I am a woman, as of that instant, you are a woman. That's what their ideology says. Now you've got 2 former NBA players who are like, all right, I'll call your bluff. I'm a woman. Let's go.
Yeah.
And so they're going to have to say something to make clear what everybody knows. These guys are not women.
Yeah.
And neither are the other dudes who are playing against women. Everyone knows that. And so I'm really glad that the 2 of these declared. I think it is 100%. All right, I'm going to wager you $20, Ben.
Yeah, I have to decide if I want to take this bet.
You got to decide. I didn't say 500. I said 20.
Okay.
$20 that Enes Kanter never plays 1 minute in WNBA.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you, so I'm not going to waste my $20. But I wonder. I do think there's a 1% chance that the NBA just sticks their feet in and says we're not moving, and then they get obliterated by. And by the way, I bet you there's more guys than these 2. These guys are now transitioning to women who identify as transgender that are going to come forward and do this as well. I bet you we're not done yet.
And by the way, we are seeing life imitate art. There's a fabulous movie called Lady Ballers that the Daily Wire put on that has a cameo from yours truly. And it is hysterical. The whole premise of it is that 5 guys in their 40s who had, as teenagers, had been the Kentucky State high school basketball champs, decide in their 40s, let's declare we're women and compete in the WNBA, and they dominate like crazy. And it's a light comedy. It's sort of done in the style of Dodgeball. Yeah. But it's got some really, really funny lines. And so if you haven't watched Lady Ballers, I highly recommend it. You would enjoy it. It's funny, and we may be watching Lady Ballers between Clay Travis's $10 million bet and Enes Freedom Kanter. Lady Ballers is coming to life.
Now, if you want to hear the rest of this conversation, you can go back and listen to the full podcast from earlier this week. Now on to story number 2. I want to move on to the Democratic Socialists of America. Their main man keeps saying what he actually believes about people in this country. There's a true disdain for America, American culture. And this time, the target was football. But it's not really about football, Senator. This is about hating America and hating what American men represent. And he decided to say that he doesn't like football, not because it's just like, I don't enjoy it. It's not a fun sport. He says it's because he has a problem with men, American men that like watching football, and they're a threat.
So this is Abdul El Sayed. We've talked about his family's ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, about his radical Islamist views, about his radical communist views. He's now decided to say motherhood sucks, America sucks, apple pie sucks. And if that was not bad enough, football sucks. Here, give a listen.
Football is very much associated with a particularly masculine and oftentimes toxically masculine culture. And so much of it was about you wanted to be able to get back up and play for your team, and you really aren't allowed to show pain or vulnerability. That's part of the sport.
That's a whole new take, Senator. I mean, when I hear that, I'm like, all right, let me get this straight. If I'm a dude and I like football, I like playing football or watching football or going to a football game, I have a problem. I'm a masculine dude, and it's toxic masculinity to want to root for my Ole Miss Rebels. So that's a new one. That's a new one on us.
All right, so Ben, let me ask you an empirical question.
I cannot wait.
Who is more apologetic for their, quote, masculinity, and who is objectively less masculine, Abdul Al-Sayed or James Tallarico?
That is a tough one. I mean, the dude who says that there's, how many genders is it? Six? Six genders, and God
that would
is
be Tallarico. God is non-binary.
Binary against a dude that says.
And by the way, Tallarico repeatedly says, "I weep for my masculinity."
Yes. He also was hanging out with a kid drag queen star last weekend.
An 11-year-old drag queen, a little boy dressed as a woman that he was cheering on. So the interesting thing about Al-Sayed, he claims at least that in high school he was captain of his football team. And I'll say the guy is pretty muscular and pretty built, but his entire campaign strategy seems to be to deceive the TikTok generation. So he puts out these show tunes of his lip syncing women singers and dancing in tight T-shirts, and all right, it's almost as if
this is why I'm not on TikTok. By the way, you just described it perfectly.
Like at some point, how exactly did they find an effeminate Muslim Islamist to run for Senate in Michigan, and another one in Texas? Like. What is it with Democrats when they're looking for manly?
They go feminine every time now. It's like, no, you can't be manly and be in our party. You have to be anti-man, anti-masculine, anti-toxic masculinity, which I guess means just being a dude.
Like, I'm really wondering, did they have a messaging meeting where they sat around and they said, okay, what message do we want to run on? Oh, affordability. Yeah, we're for affordability. Okay, that's great. What else are we for? Football sucks. I hate football.
Yes, because it's masculine terrible, yeah.
Because they hate men. Because they want you to be girly men.
You bring up an interesting point. The other day, we were having this discussion. It was a group of guys, college buddies, and they're like, did you ever, one of the guys was talking about like this whole war on men and masculine men, and how if you're masculine, that somehow means you're like on the edge of being like a wife beater and like an angry, raging, testosterone like meathead.
But by the way, to be clear, when the Democrats find people like that, they're Graham Plattner, and they are that because it's a caricature. Yeah. They're trying to find, here's a manly man, a Nazi communist like misogynist. That's what you mean.
Yes, yeah, exactly. But one of them said to me, did you ever think in college the word, man, I'm masculine? No, you're just like, I'm a dude. Like it was not this like to labeling
be clear,
of masculinity.
You and I did grow up watching He-Man.
That's true. And yeah. But it was this label
and today,
of masculine.
Today the kids grow up watching She-Man, and you wonder what's wrong in the country.
Yeah, well, that kind of explains it all. But at least now we know where he stands on football. So there's that now. This is the Democratic Party. If you watch football, you're just beating your wife. That's what they're basically saying now.
But it's not just that. While he's doing that, and he's desperately trying to run away from his radical record, you know who else is running away from her radical record?
No, the great AOC, who used to be the radical, but now is looking at the White House and wanting you to think she's not as crazy as she used to be.
The queen mother of the communist woke nuts. Listen to her on the Sunday show this weekend, running away from everything she's ever believed and everything she's ever advocated. Give a listen.
The abolished prisons, abolished police, which is also positions that have been taken by a lot of the progressive candidates who have won. Mm-hmm. How do you get around that?
Yeah.
I mean, those are not positions that are supported by
right.
most of America.
I mean, I think that a lot of these races, even right now, they'll have a tendency to be nationalized.
Yeah.
But these races ultimately are local, and all politics are local. My understanding is that that Francesca Hong has made clear her present stances to her electorate.
Yeah, she's moved away from a lot of that.
Right, she's moved away from it. And I have a local city councilman that has this saying, woke one was crazy.
Woke one was crazy. Okay, that's interesting.
And I think...
I love how now middle of the road she tries to be on this one, right?
AOC is the embodiment of woke one was crazy.
Yeah.
She is the author of woke one. The phrases she's trying to run away from, things like open borders, things like abolish ICE.
Didn't she cry at the kids in cages that Obama set up? Isn't that right? But then she said it was...
She did.
I'm pretty sure she was wailing at the wall.
In a white pantsuit, she cried at the cages. She wants open borders. Abolish the police, that was AOC. The Green New Deal, that was AOC. All of this woke rhetoric that is now indefensible. AOC started it all. Now, look, it's not complicated. AOC is running for president. And what communists do is they lie. And she's trying to run away from her record. And she's trying to excuse Francesca Hong, who said, we should abolish Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving, yeah, we should abolish it.
And AOC is trying to say, woke one was crazy. We don't believe any of the stuff we campaigned on and built a movement on and ran primaries on and defeated Democrat incumbents on and like built everything we say. We don't believe any of that. Don't worry. Everything will be fine. There's a technical word for what she's doing. That's called lying. And there's a through line from AOC to Al-Sayed to Dr. Fauci. And they are dishonest, ideological zealots. And the country's a lot worse because of them.
All right. I love that we do predictions on the show. I got a prediction. I want to get your take. If it comes down in the primary, in the Democratic primary between Kamala Harris and AOC, I predict that AOC mops the floor with Harris. You agree or disagree?
I fully agree. Kamala will not be the nominee. I think the two front runners right now on the Democrat side are AOC and Gavin Newsom. And I think the dark horse number 3 is John Ossoff.
As before, if you want to hear the rest of this conversation on this topic, you can go back and download the podcast from earlier this week to hear the entire thing. I want to get back to the big story number 3 of the week you may have missed. We are exposing the radical left, the Democratic Socialists of America, and some of the extremists that are winning primaries and winning elections around the country. One of them, Senator, is a guy by the name of James Tallarico. And every time you think you've heard the craziest thing from him, he's running for the Senate in Texas, trying to act like he's a big Texan, even though he doesn't, he's vegan, doesn't eat meat, and thinks that there's, I don't even know how many genders and God's non-binary. But every time you think, all right, it's all out there, you get something else that pops, and it makes him even more out of step with average mainstream Americans.
Well, there's a theme across all of these radical Democrat candidates, which is they're fakes. I've said for a long time that in the United States, a conservative wins when he effectively communicates what it is that he or she believes. And a liberal wins when he effectively obfuscates, when he hides or covers up what he believes. That is the theme across the board. So you have these Islamists and Marxists who campaign and they do lip singing to songs and dancing like children's characters. You have in Alaska one of the great examples of fakes. The Democrats, the incumbent senator is my very dear friend Dan Sullivan, a great Republican senator from Alaska. The Democrats recruited a guy named Dan Sullivan, to register, and he's on the ballot as a Republican. So there's going to be two people named Dan Sullivan, Republican, one the actual senator, and the other, a guy named Dan Sullivan, who has contributed to the Democrat in the campaign, whose campaign press release was written by the Democrat consultant. And their purpose in that race is to deceive the voters and to have them confused. And if 2, 3, 4% of them think they're voting for Dan Sullivan, the actual senator, and instead are voting for the liberal fake Dan Sullivan, they might elect the liberal. But Democrats don't care about democracy. That's not what this is about. This is about deceiving the voters. There's another category, which is the fake independent. So in states like Nebraska, they've recruited a liberal Democrat who claims he's an independent. They're doing the same thing in Montana, where they run a, quote, independent who's a liberal Democrat who will vote for Chuck Schumer on everything. But they want to fool the Democrats into thinking, and the voters to thinking, oh, this is not a Democrat. Another species and strategy they've tried this time is the fake pastor. And so they've decided, gosh, we have a problem with people of faith, that we're radical, godless, soulless, faith-hating, religious liberty-hating heathens. And I guess speaking, I was going to say I'm speaking excessively, but I don't know that I am. But let's take Tallarico. So Tallarico, it's widely said, is a seminarian. Now, he said, among other things, God is non-binary, there's 6 genders. He's stood before churches and said he cries and weeps for his whiteness and his masculinity. He's also said at times he hates Christianity. But I want you to listen to what he said here about teaching the Bible to kids. Give a listen.
And the last one is maybe the most insidious. It was a new state curriculum that would teach Christian Bible stories as historical fact, as the only truth to our youngest students. And I mean kindergarten, first graders. These are kids who aren't able to think for themselves yet. They haven't formed their own worldviews. And to push propaganda, to push indoctrination on those youngest students is deeply immoral.
Deeply immoral.
And understand, number one, what he's describing about the state law is totally false. There was nothing in the curriculum that was teaching the Bible in terms of indoctrinating kids. But any literate person, the Bible has been the single most consequential work ever written in the history of humanity. And you and I as Christians believe it was written by the hand of God with divine inspiration. But the curriculum is simply teaching the Bible, because if you know nothing about the Bible, you're truly an ignorant person. But I want you to listen to the word he used describing the Bible as propaganda. That if kids know something about the Bible, it is propaganda. And ask yourself, what actual Christian pastor would describe the Bible as propaganda? I agree that public schools should not be proselytizing any faith, but that's not, in fact, what the Texas curriculum does. It does ensure that you have literate kids that are aware of what's in the Bible, and by the way, what's in history books and math books and all of the whole field of knowledge. But that is who the Democrats have nominated in hopes that people will think, oh, he's just like me. I want to also point out a fellow who is running for Senate in Kansas. Now, you might not think Kansas is close, but I'll tell you, in this election cycle, the numbers are bumpy. And Kansas, Roger Marshall's the incumbent. He's a good friend of mine. He's a good man. I think he's going to win. But the Democrats recruited a pastor from a giant church in Kansas City, a very liberal pastor, to run as a Democrat. And so as a Democrat, he's supportive of all the left-wing ideology that these other lunatics support. But he's trying to cover it up. And I want you to listen to a sermon that he preached in his church. And I'm going to tell you, in the sermon, he explains that you don't actually have to be a Christian to go to heaven, and that you don't have to believe in Jesus to be saved. Give a listen.
And I've spent a lot of my life studying different world religions, and you find some get you a little closer. The image begins to become clear, like this picture on the screen. And then you study another one, you find it gets even clearer. You suddenly see that the image becomes even more in focus. And so for me, as I've studied different world religions, I sit in the chair and I'm looking through these different lenses. And when I finally got to that last one, when I finally got to Jesus and Christianity, it was like I could see clearly, the clearest that I had seen. And so I think about how Paul says, he talks about Jesus, he says, the Son is the image of the invisible God. right? And Jesus elsewhere says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And so in Christianity, we believe that God actually came and walked among us in the flesh. He didn't give us a book. He came in person. And when we look at Jesus, we have the clearest picture we have of God. And so when I began to look through the lens of Jesus, my eyesight, spiritual eyesight, I felt became the most clear it could be, like you see in this image here. Now, the truth is that a Muslim would say through Islam they see the most clearly, and a Hindu through Hinduism, and a Jew through Judaism. And so I recognize we all are, we all have a different lens that we're seeing through, and sometimes we think, depending on how we were raised and how we think, one lens is, clearly a better lens for me. And when it comes to other faiths, I believe as a Christian that they are going to, when they get to heaven, they're going to see Jesus, and they're going to say, it was you all along that I was searching for. But I don't fear that those folks will spend eternity in hell.
That's pretty radical.
Well, it is, and what it is not is biblical. You can be a philosopher, you can be a left-wing advocate, but you cannot be a Christian preacher who is actually preaching Christianity and say that. That is the literal definition of heresy. And why is that? Because it directly contradicts the Bible. And let me quote John 14:6. Quote, Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. That's what the Bible says. And yet this Democrat, Adam Hamilton, who's running as I'm a preacher, is telling people, hey, you don't have to be a Christian to be saved. Jesus is not the way, the truth, and the life. Any way is fine. We're all going to heaven. It's all great. Kumbaya. Do whatever you want. That is the message of the world, but that is not the message of Scripture.
As always, thank you for listening to Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz. Ben Ferguson with you. Don't forget to download my podcast, and you can listen to my podcast every other day you're not listening to Verdict, or each day when you listen to Verdict afterwards. I'd love to have you as a listener to, again, the Ben Ferguson podcast, and we will see you back here on Monday morning.